The diamond on my finger costs more than my mother made in her entire life, and I feel nothing when I look at it. Nothing except the cold calculation of what it represents. Approximately 3 months until the doctors say his heart will give out, and then I'll be free. Free and wealthy beyond anything my childhood self could have imagined. My name is Elena, and I've been married to Richard Ashworth III for 7 years. He's 68, I'm 34, and every single day of our marriage has been a performance worthy of an Oscar. Have you ever worn a mask so long you forgot what your real face looks like? That's me. That's been me for so long that sometimes, in the quiet moments before dawn, I wonder if the mask has become my actual skin. I'm curious, have you ever pretended to be someone you're not for so long that you lost yourself in the lie? Because if you have, you might understand what I'm about to tell you. Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know I'm not alone in this. I'm sitting in his study right now, watching him sleep in his leather chair by the fireplace. His breathing is shallow, labored. The oxygen tank hums beside him like a mechanical heartbeat. His skin has that grayish pallor that comes with a failing heart. And I'm writing this confession because I need someone, anyone, to know the truth before it's too late. Not because I feel guilty. I stopped feeling guilty 3 years ago. No, I'm writing this because something happened last week. Something that changed everything. Something that made me realize that the hunter might have become the hunted all along. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really began. Not to my wedding day. That was just the middle of the story. No, to understand how a woman like me ended up here, counting down the days until her husband dies, you need to go back further. You need to understand hunger. Not the kind you feel when you skip lunch. I mean the kind that hollows you out. The kind that makes you do things you swore you'd never do. The kind that teaches you that morality is a luxury for people who've never had to choose between dignity and survival. I grew up in a town so small it didn't have a stoplight. My father left when I was 6. My mother worked 3 jobs and still couldn't keep the electricity on. I learned to read by candlelight. I learned to smile through hunger pangs. I learned that being pretty was a currency more valuable than anything in my mother's empty wallet. By 16, I understood something that most people never figure out. The world is divided into those who take and those who are taken from. I decided very early which category I would belong to. Richard found me, or rather, I found him, at a charity gala in Manhattan. I was 27, working as a hostess at exclusive events. That's a polite way of saying I was beautiful, charming, and available to be arm candy for wealthy men who needed a date for the evening. He was 61, recently widowed, and worth approximately $340 million. I saw him across the room, and I thought, there, that one, that's my ticket out. If you think that makes me a monster, you might be right. But monsters aren't born, they're made. Richard wasn't stupid. That was the first thing I learned about him. Most wealthy men I'd encountered had inherited their fortunes or stumbled into them through luck. Richard had built his from nothing, started with a single hardware store his grandfather left him, and turned it into a retail empire spanning 3 continents. Men like that don't fall for pretty faces and fluttering eyelashes. They see through the performance. They know when they're being played. So I didn't play him. At least, not in the obvious way. That first night, I ignored him completely. While other women at the gala circled him like sharks smelling blood, I positioned myself across the room and made sure he saw me laughing, genuinely laughing, at something another guest said. I made sure he noticed me refusing a glass of champagne in favor of sparkling water. I made sure he saw me leave early, alone, without a second glance in his direction. 3 days later, I received an invitation to a private dinner at his penthouse. I declined. A week after that, flowers arrived at my apartment. White orchids, my favorite, though I had no idea how he knew that. The card simply said, "Please reconsider, R." I made him wait 2 more weeks before I agreed to coffee. That's the thing about catching a big fish. You have to let him think he's the one doing the hunting. Our courtship lasted 8 months. 8 months of me being exactly what he needed without ever appearing to try. I was intelligent, but not threatening. Ambitious, but not greedy. Warm, but not desperate. I asked about his business, remembered the details, offered insights that surprised him. I never once mentioned money. I researched him obsessively. I knew about his first wife, Margaret, who died of cancer after 32 years of marriage. I knew about his estranged daughter, Victoria, who hadn't spoken to him in a decade after some falling out he refused to discuss. I knew about his passion for rare books, his hatred of pretension, his secret fear of dying alone. I became the solution to every void in his life. "You're different," he told me one night, 3 months in. "You don't want anything from me." I smiled and squeezed his hand. "I just want you, Richard. Everything else is just noise." The lie tasted like copper on my tongue. When he proposed, I cried. Real tears, actually, though not for the reasons he thought. I cried because I'd won. Because the hungry little girl from nowhere had finally clawed her way into a life that no one could take away. I cried because I'd become exactly what I always swore I'd never be. But survival doesn't care about your principles. The prenup was generous, more generous than it should have been. Even in divorce, I'd walk away with enough to never worry again. But I had no intention of divorcing him. I was playing a longer game. His heart condition wasn't public knowledge when we married. He told me on our wedding night, almost apologetically. "I might have 5 years," he said. "Maybe 10 if I'm lucky. I wanted you to know what you were signing up for." I held him and whispered that I didn't care about time, that I'd rather have 5 years with him than 50 with anyone else. Inside, I was doing math. 5 years, 10 at most. I could wait. 3 years earlier. The Ashworth estate sits on 40 acres of Connecticut coastline, a sprawling Georgian mansion that looks like something out of a period drama. 27 rooms, a staff of 12, a wine cellar worth more than most houses. I hated it from the moment I moved in. Not because it wasn't beautiful, it was obscenely beautiful. I hated it because it felt like a museum, cold, preserved, full of the ghost of a dead woman whose shoes I was expected to fill. Margaret's portrait still hung in the library. Her things remained in the guest bedroom closet, untouched for 3 years. Her garden, which she'd apparently tended personally, was maintained by a groundskeeper who spoke of her like she was a saint. The staff watched me with polite suspicion. They'd loved Margaret. They saw me as the interloper, the young gold digger who'd swooped in before their beloved master's first wife was cold in her grave. They weren't wrong, of course, but their judgment still stung. "Give it time," Richard said when I mentioned the tension. "They're protective. They'll warm up." They didn't. 4 months after I moved in, I found out why. It was Helen, the head housekeeper, who broke first. She'd been with the family for 25 years, loyal to a fault, and apparently loyal enough to leave an anonymous letter in my jewelry box. "We know what you are. You're not the first. You won't be the last. But you should know, the house always protects its own." I confronted Richard that night. "What does this mean, not the first?" He sighed, looking older than his years. "Margaret, she found out about an affair I had, years ago. A woman who worked for one of our companies. It nearly destroyed our marriage. The staff, they're still protective. They think I'm like her, aren't you? His voice was quiet, not accusatory, just curious, like he'd always known and was finally asking aloud. That was the moment I should have come clean, the moment I should have dropped the act and been honest for the first time in our entire relationship. Instead, I let my eyes fill with tears. How can you ask me that after everything? He apologized. Of course he did. That night, I made a decision. I needed allies in this house. The staff was clearly a lost cause. But there was someone else, someone whose absence hung over the estate like a shadow. Victoria, Richard's daughter. She was 41, divorced, living in San Francisco. She hadn't spoken to her father since Margaret's diagnosis some 8 years earlier. The rift between them was legendary. Multiple lawyers had been involved, restraining orders threatened, inheritance battles waged. But I'd learned enough about family dynamics to know that where there's that much anger, there's usually that much love buried beneath it. If I could somehow reunite them, it wasn't altruism. Victoria was the only real threat to my plan. As the sole heir, she stood to inherit everything, including the ability to contest any bequest to me. But if she and Richard reconciled, if I was the one who brought them back together, I'd have insurance. She'd owe me. She'd defend my claim. I started researching her. What I found changed everything. Victoria Ashworth Chen wasn't what I expected. I'd built her up in my mind as a villain, the estranged daughter fighting for money she hadn't earned, throwing tantrums because daddy remarried, a spoiled princess. But the Victoria I discovered through careful research was something else entirely. She'd built her own career, independent of her father's empire, founder of a nonprofit providing legal aid to domestic abuse survivors, board member of 3 environmental organizations, raised 2 children as a single mother after her husband left. She hadn't taken a penny of Ashworth money since she was 22. The restraining order I'd heard about, it wasn't from her to Richard, it was from her to Margaret. That's when I started pulling at threads I probably shouldn't have touched. 4 years before my arrival, asterisk, the falling out between Richard and Victoria wasn't about money or inheritance. It was about what Victoria had discovered about her mother. Margaret Ashworth, the saint, the beloved wife, the woman whose portrait still hung in our library, had been slowly poisoning her husband for years. I found the medical records hidden in Richard's private safe. I'd learned the combination months ago, waiting for the right moment to use it. Years of mysterious symptoms, fatigue, cognitive decline, heart problems that seemed to worsen with no clear cause. And then, after Margaret's death, a remarkable stabilization. Victoria had figured it out. She'd confronted her mother. Margaret had denied everything, then turned Richard against his own daughter, convincing him that Victoria was mentally unstable, making wild accusations to secure her inheritance early. Richard had believed his wife. Victoria had cut off contact to protect herself. I sat in that safe room, hands shaking, reading through documents that rewrote everything I thought I knew about this family. Margaret hadn't been a saint. She'd been a monster. And Richard, my mark, my target, my meal ticket, had been her victim. I should have been triumphant. This information was power, leverage, a way to secure my position forever. Instead, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Compassion. Not for Margaret, not even for Victoria, for Richard. He'd spent decades loving a woman who was slowly killing him. He'd sacrificed his relationship with his only child to defend her, and he had no idea. That night, I watched him sleep, the oxygen tank humming, and for the first time, I saw him not as a mark, but as a man. A deeply wounded man who'd been betrayed by everyone he trusted. Everyone except me. No, I reminded myself, you're betraying him too, just differently. But something had shifted. I knew it then, even if I couldn't admit it. I was in trouble. 2 years earlier. I should have used what I found. The logical play was obvious. Reveal the truth about Margaret, reunite Richard with Victoria, position myself as the hero of the story. Instead, I did something stupid. I fell in love with my husband. Not all at once. It happened gradually, like a slow leak in a dam, a crack I didn't notice until the water was already flooding in. It started with small things. The way he always remembered how I took my coffee, not because a servant told him, but because he'd paid attention. The way he asked about my day and actually listened to the answers. The way he touched my face sometimes with such tenderness, like I was something precious he couldn't quite believe was real. Asterisk. You saved me, Elena, asterisk, he told me one night, a year into our marriage. After Margaret died, I was ready to follow her. Not actively, just passively, letting myself fade. You gave me a reason to stay. I should have felt triumphant. I felt sick, because I realized something terrifying. I didn't want him to die anymore. I didn't want his money, or rather, the money had stopped being the point. I wanted him, his laugh, his wisdom, his gentleness, the way he looked at me like I was the best thing that had ever happened to him. I wanted to deserve that look. But how do you tell someone that your entire relationship started as a con? How do you confess that the woman they love is a fiction? I couldn't. So I did something even stupider. I started being real. Slowly, carefully, I let pieces of the actual Elena surface. The one who grew up hungry. The one who was terrified of poverty. The one who'd done things she wasn't proud of to survive. I told him about my mother, my childhood, my hunger. I told him almost everything, just not the beginning, not the calculation, not the cold mathematics of that first meeting. And here's where I need to pause and ask you something. At this point, I had to make a choice. Tell him the truth about how we started, or keep the secret and try to build something real on a rotten foundation. What would you have done? Was I right to stay silent, or should I have risked everything for honesty? Type truth or secret in the comments. I genuinely want to know what you would have chosen, because even now, I'm not sure I made the right call. He listened to my confessions without judgment. He held me when I cried about my past. He told me that none of it mattered, that the person I was when we met wasn't the person he fell in love with. I'd become something more. We all have things we're not proud of, he said. What matters is who we choose to become. He didn't know the half of it, but here's the cruel joke. Right when I decided I wanted to be a real wife to him, his health began to fail. The heart condition he'd been managing for years started to accelerate. More hospital visits, more adjustments to medication, more nights when his breathing was so labored I'd lie awake listening, terrified that each breath would be his last. I'd wanted him to die so I could inherit. Now, I'd have given every penny back for one more year with him. 18 months earlier, Victoria Ashworth Chen showed up at our doorstep on a Tuesday afternoon. No warning, no call, just a woman with her mother's sharp cheekbones standing in the foyer, looking at me like I was something she'd found on the bottom of her shoe. You must be the new wife. Elena, I extended my hand. She didn't take it. I know who you are. I had you investigated. My blood ran cold, but I kept my face neutral. That seems excessive. You'd be surprised what's necessary when you're protecting a dying man from predators. I'm not. Please. Her laugh was brittle. I saw your background, the hostess work, the pattern of wealthy older men, the convenient timing of your arrival in my father's life. You're not even original. I should have been afraid. I was, a little, but mostly, I was angry. And you're the daughter who abandoned him when he needed her most, who let him believe his wife was a saint while knowing the truth about what she was doing to him. Victoria's face went white. Asterisk. What did you say? I found the medical records, the pattern of poisoning. I know what Margaret was, and I know that you knew too. So before you stand there calling me a predator, maybe ask yourself, who really hurt him more? The silence stretched between us like a wire about to snap. Then Victoria did something I didn't expect. She started to cry. I tried, she whispered. I tried to tell him. For years. He wouldn't listen. She'd convinced him I was crazy, that I was making it up to steal my inheritance early. She was so good at manipulation, you can't imagine. And when she got sick herself, when she was dying, he wanted me to forgive her, to come say goodbye to the woman who was killing him. I couldn't. I couldn't stand there and watch him mourn her. I stood frozen, watching this woman, this stranger who was technically my stepdaughter, fall apart in my foyer. Does he know? I asked quietly. About the poisoning? Victoria shook her head. He never believed me. And now, what's the point? She's dead. He's dying. Let him remember her however he needs to. I thought about the portrait in the library, the untouched closet, the garden. I thought about how much of his remaining life Richard was spending mourning a woman who'd tried to murder him. That's not protection, I said. That's cruelty. Victoria's eyes met mine. For the first time, I saw something other than contempt in them. You actually care about him? It wasn't a question. Yes. And for once, I meant it. Then help me find a way to tell him that doesn't destroy whatever time he has left. I should have refused, should have stayed out of it, should have protected my position instead of getting involved in decade-old family warfare. Okay, I said, but I need something from you first. What? Stop trying to destroy me. Whatever you found in your investigation, let it go. I'm not the enemy. I'm not Margaret. I might have started with less than pure intentions, but I love him. That's real. Victoria studied me for a long moment. We'll see, she said finally. We'll see. 1 year earlier. We told them together, Victoria and me, united for the first time since we'd met. It was not the conversation I'd imagined. Richard listened to the evidence, the medical records, the statements Victoria had gathered from former staff members years ago, the pattern of symptoms that started after Margaret discovered his affair and conveniently began to worsen whenever divorce seemed possible. He listened, and then he got up from his chair, walked to the library, and took down Margaret's portrait himself. No tears, no denial, no explosion of rage, just a quiet, devastating acceptance. I knew, he said finally, still facing the wall where the portrait had hung. Victoria and I looked at each other. You knew? Victoria's voice cracked. Not consciously, not in a way I could admit, but somewhere, somehow, I knew. He turned to face his daughter. That's why I couldn't believe you when you tried to tell me, because believing you meant accepting that my whole life, my whole marriage, was a lie, that I'd been a fool for 30 years. I couldn't face that. It was easier to lose you than to see the truth. Dad. I'm sorry, Victoria. His voice broke on her name. Asterisk. I'm so sorry. I chose her ghost over your living presence. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. What happened next was between them, a reconciliation years in the making, full of tears and recriminations, and eventually something that looked like healing, I stayed in the background, watching, feeling like an intruder in this family moment I'd helped create. Later, after Victoria had left with promises to return soon, Richard found me in the garden. Asterisk, "You gave me back my daughter," he said. "You saw the truth that everyone else either missed or was too afraid to speak." Elena, he took my hand. "I know you're not what you appear to be." My heart stopped. "I've always known. You forget, I built an empire by reading people. I knew you were calculating that first night at the gala. I knew your story didn't add up. I knew you were playing a long game." I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. But here's what I also knew. I didn't care. He squeezed my hand. "Margaret pretended to love me while slowly killing me. You pretended to love me while slowly, actually loving me. I could see it happening, the mask slipping, the real woman emerging. That's why I married you. Not because of who you were pretending to be, but because of who I believed you could become." Richard. Tears were streaming down my face. "I'm dying, Elena. We both know it. Maybe months, maybe another year if I'm lucky. I don't want to spend whatever time I have left pretending. So I'm asking you, no more masks, no more calculations. Just be here with me, really here." I collapsed against him, sobbing like I hadn't sobbed since I was a child. "I don't deserve you," I whispered. "Probably not," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. But life isn't about what we deserve. It's about what we do with what we're given. For the first time in 7 years, I had no strategy, no plan, no calculation. Just love, and the terror of losing it. 6 months earlier. The months that followed were the happiest of my life. Richard and Victoria rebuilt their relationship brick by brick. Dinners together, long conversations about the past, introductions to her children, my step-grandchildren, technically, which was surreal given that Victoria was older than me. The staff slowly thawed as they saw the change in the household. Helen, the housekeeper who'd left that threatening note years ago, actually apologized one afternoon. "I was wrong about you," she said, simply. "You're good for him." I didn't know how to be good for someone. I'd spent my whole life knowing how to use people, extract value, protect myself. Being genuinely good, giving without calculating the return, was like learning a new language at 40. But I tried. Richard's health continued to decline. We both knew the end was coming. But somehow, accepting that made the time we had sweeter. "I've changed my will," he told me one evening. "You should know." My old self would have leaned forward, eager for details. My new self just held his hand. "You don't have to tell me. I want to. Victoria gets the business interests. She's earned the right to decide what happens to my legacy. The house goes to her as well, eventually, though you'll have lifetime residence rights. But the liquid assets, Elena, you're going to be very wealthy. I don't... Please," he smiled. "Let me do this. You came to me for money, we both know that, but you stayed for love. Let me honor both versions of the woman you've been." I tried to argue. He wouldn't hear it. 3 weeks later, he had his first major cardiac episode. The doctors stabilized him, but the message was clear. We were in the final stretch. Weeks, maybe, a few months at most. I stopped sleeping, stopped eating properly. The thing I'd once wished for, his death, my freedom, my wealth, now terrified me more than anything I'd ever faced. "You have to let me go," Richard said one night, watching me pace by his bed. "When the time comes, you have to let me go." "I can't." "You can. You're stronger than you know." "I'm not strong. I'm a con artist who got lucky." "You're a survivor who learned to love. That's not lucky. That's miraculous." We stayed up until dawn that night, talking about everything and nothing. about his childhood, about my fears, about what comes after death, if anything. "I'm not afraid," he said as the sun rose. "I used to be, but now I've made peace with Margaret's memory, I've reconciled with Victoria, and I've loved you, really loved, with nothing held back. What more could anyone ask for? More time. Time is overrated." He kissed my forehead. "It's not how long you live, it's how truly." I wanted to believe him. I wasn't sure I could. 1 week ago. Richard died on a Tuesday. It wasn't dramatic, no final words, no gasping confessions. He simply stopped breathing in his sleep, his hand still wrapped around mine. One moment he was there, the next he wasn't. I didn't scream, didn't cry. I just sat there, holding his hand, watching the sun rise through the window, trying to understand how the world could keep turning when mine had just stopped. Victoria found me there 3 hours later. The funeral was beautiful, tasteful, exactly what he would have wanted. Hundreds of people came, business associates, old friends, charity recipients whose lives he'd touched. They all had stories about his generosity, his wisdom, his kindness. I stood beside Victoria, accepting condolences, playing the role of grieving widow. Except this time, it wasn't a role. After the burial, the lawyers came. The reading of the will was scheduled for 3 days later, but Richard's attorney, a man named Patterson, who'd known him for 40 years, asked to speak with me privately beforehand. "There's something you should know," he said, leading me into Richard's study. "Something Richard asked me to tell you only after his death." My stomach dropped. What? Patterson handed me an envelope, my name on the front, in Richard's handwriting. "He wrote this 6 months ago, asked me to give it to you when the time came." I opened it with trembling hands. "Elena, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope it was peaceful. I hope you were there. There's something I never told you, something I've been carrying since before we met. You think you found me at that gala. You think our meeting was chance or the result of your careful maneuvering. But Elena, I found you first. I'd been watching you for months before that night. I knew exactly who you were, what you did, how you operated. I'd hired investigators, built a complete profile. I knew about your mother, your childhood, your hunger. And I chose you. Not despite what you were, but because of it. Because I saw something in you that reminded me of myself at your age. That desperation, that willingness to do whatever it took to escape. I'd been that person once. I knew how lonely it was, how much it cost. Margaret had nearly destroyed me by the time I found you. Not physically, I didn't know about the poisoning then, but spiritually. I was empty, dead inside. I knew she'd never loved me, not really. I was a mark to her too, just like I was to you. The difference is, I never believed Margaret could change. But you, I saw your hunger, and I saw something else beneath it, something worth saving. So I engineered our meeting. I made sure you'd notice me. I let you think you were running the con, when really, I was running one of my own. My con was simple. I was going to make you love me, really love me, not for money or security, but for myself. It was manipulation, I know that, and maybe that makes me just as guilty as you. But here's the thing, Elena, it worked. Not my manipulation, yours. Yours broke through first. I watched you fall in love with me despite every instinct telling you not to. I watched you become real, and somewhere in that process, I fell in love with you too. We were two con artists who conned each other into being genuine. I don't know if that's beautiful or tragic, maybe both. There's a reason I'm telling you this now, after I'm gone. It's not to hurt you, it's to free you. You've spent your whole life believing you're a predator. believing you took advantage of a foolish old man. You weren't. You didn't. You were chosen, and in the end, we chose each other. Live well, Elena. Use whatever I've left you to become whoever you want to be, not who hunger forced you to become, but who you actually are underneath all those masks. I love you. That was never a con. Yours, always, Richard. The first read the letter 3 times before I could breathe again. He'd known. From the very beginning, he'd known. And he'd loved me anyway. More than that, he'd chosen me, sought me out, engineered our entire relationship because he'd seen something in me worth saving. All these years, I'd thought I was the hunter. I was the hunted. We both were. And somehow, in the most twisted way possible, that made our love the most honest thing either of us had ever experienced. Now it's been a week since I read Richard's letter. I'm sitting in his study, my study now, watching the sunset over the Connecticut coast. The oxygen tank is gone. The medical equipment has been removed. But I can still smell him here, still feel his presence in every book on the shelves, every worn spot on the leather chair. Victoria stopped by yesterday. She knows about the letter. Richard wrote her one too, explaining everything. I expected her to be angry, to feel that her father had been manipulated, that I was still somehow the villain. Instead, she hugged me. He was happy, she said. The last year of his life, after everything came out, he was happier than I'd ever seen him. That was you. That was because of you. And because of the truth, I said. Because he finally knew the truth about everything. Maybe, she smiled sadly. Or maybe the truth is that none of us are who we pretend to be. We're all just trying to find someone who'll love us anyway. The will was read today. Richard was generous, obscenely generous by any standard. But the money feels different now. Not like a prize I won, but like a gift from someone who loved me. A gift with a purpose. Use whatever I've left you to become whoever you want to be. I've been thinking about that all day. Who I want to be. Who I actually am, underneath all the masks and calculations and survival strategies. I don't know yet, but for the first time in my life, I have the freedom to find out. I started writing this confession because I needed someone to know the truth. I thought the truth was that I'd married a man for his money and was waiting for him to die. That was true, once. But the real truth is messier, harder, stranger. The real truth is that 2 broken people found each other and somehow, against all odds, managed to become whole. I was a con artist who married for money. I became a woman who loved and was loved. Those 2 things are both true. They exist together, uncomfortable and contradictory, like most true things in life. Richard's last gift to me wasn't his fortune. It was the knowledge that I was never as alone as I thought, that even in my darkest, most calculating moments, someone saw me, really saw me, and thought I was worth saving. Maybe that's what love is in the end. Not ignoring someone's flaws, but seeing them clearly and choosing them anyway. I'm going to try to be worthy of that choice. I'm going to try to live like someone who deserves to be loved. And I'm going to stop counting down the days and start making them count instead. The diamond on my finger still costs more than my mother made in her entire life. But now, when I look at it, I don't feel nothing. I feel everything. So that's my story, the whole truth, finally told to someone other than myself. I married a man for money and ended up discovering what love actually means. I thought I was running a con, and it turned out we were both running one on each other, until neither of us was pretending anymore. I need to know, Have you ever started something with selfish intentions and had it turn into something real? Have you ever been surprised by love showing up where you least expected it? I want to hear your stories in the comments. And tell me honestly, do you think what Richard and I had was genuine, even though it started as manipulation on both sides? I've been asking myself that question for a week, and I still don't have an answer. Some people will say we were both just using each other until the end. Others will say that how something starts doesn't define how it ends. What do you believe? Let me know below. I read every single comment, and these days, I have all the time in the world.